It was supposed to be a routine stop. Another night, another patrol, another traffic infraction to add to his list. Officer Hendrick thought he had it all figured out. Just another moment to assert his power, humiliate someone, and go home with his ego inflated. But he had no idea what he was about to walk into. He thought I was just another driver, someone he could intimidate, pull over without cause and send on their way. But when he opened my trunk, froze, and stared at a document that would change his life forever, I knew the show had just begun. Because sometimes the predator becomes the prey, and this night would be one Hendrick would never forget. The air felt heavy, a prelude to a storm that hadn't quite arrived, but still lingered in the atmosphere. I drove down Main Street, my hands gripping the steering wheel as the rain drizzled against my windshield. The wipers worked overtime, barely keeping up with the relentless droplets. But my mind was elsewhere. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. It had been one of those long days where everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers, where the world felt just a little bit too much. All I wanted was a hot shower and the kind of silence that could wash away the exhaustion. Then out of nowhere, I saw them, the flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. The sound of the sirens broke through my foggy thoughts, dragging me back to the reality of the moment. A police cruiser. Great. Another one of those nights. I muttered under my breath. Here we go, as I eased my car to the side of the road. I wasn't speeding. My taillights were fine. My plates were up to date. I was good. But of course I knew what this was. Driving while black. Classic. I rolled my window down as the cruiser came to a stop behind me. The hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of the lights making the already tense atmosphere feel even thicker. I could already tell this was going to be one of those stops. Unnecessary but impossible to avoid. The officer got out of the car, his boots crunching on the wet pavement. He was a big guy, tall and broad, with a kind of presence that screamed, "I own this town." His uniform was perfectly pressed, and there was no sign of a single crease or wrinkle. He looked like he had just stepped out of some sort of cop movie, like he was there to deliver some kind of punishment, like he knew he was in charge. I didn't want to play his game, but I knew the drill. I'd been down this road before. As the officer approached, I kept my hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, making sure he could see everything. He stopped right at my window and looked at me with that all too familiar look, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "License and registration," he barked at me, his tone cold and detached. No pleasantries, no small talk. He didn't ask if I was okay or if I had any issues. No, this was business, and I was already on the defensive. "Good evening, officer," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Can I ask why you pulled me over?" "You're driving suspiciously slow," he said, squinting at me, like I just insulted his entire family. Suspiciously slow? That wasn't even a thing. "It's raining," I said, trying to keep it together. "I'm just being careful." He leaned in closer, the rain dripping off the brim of his hat, his eyes narrowing as though he was searching for something. "Careful, huh? You got something to hide in this car, pal?" The word "pal" came out with enough condescension to fill a stadium, and I could feel my blood start to boil. "Officer, I don't have anything to hide," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the urge to snap. "Everything's in order." I slowly reached for my glove compartment to grab my license and registration, taking extra care to make sure my movements were deliberate and non-threatening. The last thing I needed was for him to think I was reaching for a weapon. He snatched the documents from my hand, barely glancing at them before turning to walk back to his cruiser. I watched him through my side mirror, half expecting him to call for backup or pull some other stunt. There was something about him, something in the way he moved, that told me this wasn't going to be a simple stop. When he returned, he didn't look any less irritated. If anything, it seemed like he was actively looking for a reason to escalate things. He handed me my papers back without a word, then shot me a look that made it clear he wasn't done yet. "Step out of the vehicle," he demanded, his voice clipped. I blinked. "What's the reason, officer?" I asked, keeping my tone polite but firm. "I've done nothing wrong." "Step out of the vehicle," he repeated, the command ringing out in the air like it was his right to demand whatever he wanted. I sighed and stepped out of the car. The cold rain soaked through my jacket almost immediately, sending a chill through my body. But it wasn't the cold that made me uneasy. It was him. Something about him screamed, "Bad news." "Open the trunk," he said, pointing to the back of my car. "Officer, with all due respect, you need a warrant for that," I said, my voice steady but my nerves starting to fray. He smirked. "That's where you're wrong," he said, walking toward the trunk, fumbling with his keys like he owned the whole damn car. "I can check whatever I damn well please." "No, you can't," I said, trying to stand my ground. "This is a violation of my rights." But he wasn't listening. He just popped the trunk open as if it was his personal treasure chest, and that's when he saw it. A sleek gray document case, sitting neatly in the corner of the trunk. "What's this?" he asked, his voice shifting from annoyed to curious, the edge of suspicion creeping in. "Personal property," I said sharply, trying to keep control of the situation. "You have no right to touch it." But he was already reaching for it. I could see the eagerness in his eyes, the way his fingers trembled as he fumbled with the latch. My heart started to race. This wasn't just about some small violation anymore. I had a feeling things were about to escalate. The moment he opened the case, I could feel the shift in the air. His eyes widened as he scanned the document inside. His jaw tightened and his hands started to shake. I almost laughed at the way his expression changed from smug to pale in an instant. It was like he had just seen a ghost. "Officer Hendrick," I said, watching his face, now drained of color. "Do you want to explain why you're holding a termination notice for yourself?" The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of his realization. His fingers trembled as he held the paper closer, his eyes darting over the text, and then back to me. "This can't be real," he muttered under his breath, his voice shaking. "You want to read the rest of it?" I asked, leaning against my car, watching him unravel in real time. His eyes flicked from the document back to my face, his mind clearly racing. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. But there it was, in black and white. His name, his offenses, the recommendation for immediate dismissal, and at the bottom, the signature, James Peterson, Chief of Police. He looked up at me, his face frozen in disbelief. You're not my boss." I smiled, a slow, deliberate grin. "Oh, but I am," I said. "And that, Hendrick, is why you're done. You violated my rights, and now you're going to pay for it. You're not the one holding the power anymore." He opened his mouth to say something, but the words got caught in his throat. He looked like a fish gasping for air, helpless and desperate. "This isn't a mistake," I said, cutting him off. "This is your career-ending moment, and you walked right into it."